Hello and welcome back to Flowstate Podcast, the 36th episode, I believe. I was listening to last week's episode and I think Luke introduced it as episode number 5, which is definitely incorrect. I think that should have been 35, but we've been doing this for a bit longer than 5 weeks. But if you haven't worked it out already, it's Adam on his own without his good mate and accomplice Luke. Definitely feels strange to be sitting here on my own, pressing the record button and chatting for as long as I possibly can. But we're going to give it a go. Luke's off celebrating his birthday before he welcomes his second child into the world in January. So Luke, if you're listening, hope you had a lovely weekend and you're feeling relaxed and restored and ready to get into the trenches again with some night feeds and all the rest. So yeah, we'll catch up soon. But I suppose I wanted to record an episode today, so we didn't have a break in the podcast. We did take a couple of breaks over the last month or so. So yeah, we wanted to keep the ball rolling as we approach the festive period and hopefully provide you with some interesting conversation and maybe some value or some help that you can apply to your own training and running. So suppose what I'll be diving into today is a little bit about my own training. We'll recap that as always. I'll probably do a little bit more of a detailed review of my own training over the last, we'll say 10 days or so. I'd also like to talk about how to train through December and through the winter months here in Ireland and the UK particularly, where it's cold, it's dark. There are maybe the distractions of big nights out, work parties, pints, all the rest. Dealing with, I suppose, the lack of motivation as well now that the racing season is over and people feel like they're very much on the wind down. How do we stay motivated, and how can you, I guess, apply some basic training to help you, I suppose, springboard into next year, but also managing those nights out, the Christmas parties, the social pressures, and also whether a break might be useful, whether actually taking some time away from the sport over the week of Christmas or over the month of December or whatever, that can also be really useful, just depending on where you've come from in your running and where you're going to in the next year. So that's hopefully what we'll look to cover in the next 40, 50, 60 minutes. We'll see how things go. We'll see how much talking I'm fit for this afternoon. And like I say, hopefully there's something of value for you in here. So first things first, I will dig into it's currently Tuesday afternoon, the day before the podcast usually goes out. So we'll dig into my last week of training beginning last Monday. So last Monday morning, I got out and I should also just mention, for anyone that's been listening on a weekly basis, you'll know that I've been doing a mixture of things. I haven't really been focusing on a racing schedule. I'm taking a break from running races for a period of time for a bit of a mental reset, to sort of take the emphasis off sort of the structured training approach that I followed for the last, I suppose, 7-8 years, which has yielded really good results. And has taught me a lot about the sport, but I felt like, come sort of August, September of this year, it was time to take a break and, just come away from the structure for a period of time to sort of, I guess reset physically, mentally, and come back to the sport with renewed vigor. So that's why training is going to look a bit all over the place, and you might be surprised at some of the things that you're about to hear, but I'm going to include everything. I do tend to walk a little bit. I'm not going to include that in my training recap. I try to sort of spend time active on a daily basis. I do work from a desk at home, so I spend a lot of time sitting. So I do try to get out for some walks as well and enjoy getting outside when the weather's nice and getting into nature. But last Monday started with, and I've also changed my Strava to kilometers. I've left the mileage, guys, the mileage behind. I still work in miles. I still understand miles. I still use speeds in miles, especially with lots of my athletes, but for some reason I decided to change my Strava into kilometers. So I'm reading my training log from Strava right now. So last Monday I did a 20-kilometer run, 1 hour and 32 minutes at 4:36 per k pace. Pretty easy. I would describe that as about a 4 or a 5 out of 10. Not what I would call really easy, but definitely pretty easy. I ran over some trails. I just remember the weather was beautiful. It was a lovely run. Then Tuesday, I have been, if you've been listening and if you've been following along from home, I've been doing a lot of swimming with Kira, my wife, over the last, I think we started on about the 12th or 13th of October. So the last 6 or 7 weeks. So Tuesday, we have joined the local Masters Swimming Club, and on Tuesday we did a Masters swim session at 6 o'clock in the morning. So we were in the pool 6 o'clock for a session, and just in the notes on Strava, I've written that it was a good session, and I'm definitely feeling better. We did a variety of strokes and drills, and yeah, it was 1 hour in the pool and around like 42 minutes of total swim time is what I'm reading. So that's been great. And I really couldn't recap the full session because, just like I was saying to Kira this morning when we finished today's session, a swimming session is totally different to a run session. There is so many more moving parts and elements to a swim session, which make it all the more complex. It takes up like a full... If you look at the session as written by the coaches, it pretty much takes up a full whiteboard that you would typically see in a classroom. So there's a lot of stuff on there, but you take it one step at a time. You know, you do the warm up and then you look at the next step and the next step and the next step and so on. And the coaches are great at kind of taking you through the session. But the reason why there's so many different elements is to improve like your technique and your stroke, as well as there is more than just one stroke. If we think about it, you know, running, there is only one type of running. In swimming, there are 4 strokes: the freestyle or front crawl, as I would have known it, the backstroke, the breaststroke, and the butterfly. So you're doing a mixture of all of these things, not in every session. And then there is a whole host of drills and different things to improve your timing and body position to help improve those things. So a session really encompasses a lot of this stuff, and there is absolutely no way that I could remember everything in a session, but it was a great session. I really enjoyed it. The hour in the pool just absolutely flies by, and it's lovely that myself and Kira can attend that and do that together. So that was last Tuesday morning early, and then you're probably going to laugh at this one, but I was actually in the pool again on Tuesday mid-morning with my good friend, my new friend Paolo Ross, from Cool FM that we interviewed on the podcast there a couple of weeks ago. We wanted to meet up at some point to do a swim. So it just happened to fall the same day as the master session, and I really didn't want to miss the early morning master session with Kira. So I was actually in the pool again in Belfast, late morning, on the same Tuesday. I did a little bit less. I took it pretty relaxed because there was quite a bit of fatigue in the upper body from the earlier swim, but it was great to meet up with him and do another session in the pool that day. So it ended up being a pretty full-on day by the end, because after that in the evening I had football training. So 1 hour of football training, which usually begins with obviously a warm-up followed by some sort of fitness work, which tends to be on the faster end of the spectrum as opposed to the longer end. We tend to do sort of sprint work and some change of direction work, and sometimes with a ball as well at feet. So it tends to start with that for maybe 25 to 30 minutes, and then it finishes with some either condition games or full pitch sided games. So that was a big day on Tuesday, unintentionally a big day by the time I was getting to bed Tuesday night, but all the same it was great. Wednesday I hit the treadmill. I was actually feeling surprisingly good Wednesday, but I did wait to sort of later in the afternoon until 3 o'clock to do anything because I just wanted to give myself a little bit more recovery time. But the weather was brutal, so I got indoors for a treadmill session. A session that I did a couple of weeks ago that I've just repeated. I did 20 minutes. Well, firstly I did a warm-up and then into a 20-minute tempo, plus 5 times 3 minutes. So I've just noted here on Strava the tempo sort of started at about 5:55 pace and finished at 5:40 pace, which was pretty good all things considered, especially given that I haven't been doing much mileage over the last number of weeks. Then I took a 3-minute jog, I believe, and then I started some 3-minute reps. I did 5 of those with about a 50 to 60 second rest between them, where I started them at about 5:37 per mile pace. Again, I'm flicking between kilometers and miles, but yeah, these are in miles for some reason. 5:37 per mile down to about 5:18 per mile. And I've just written there that I felt good. I took on board 80 grams of a carbohydrate drink during that session because I was going to do a swim session later that evening. Wednesday evening, we had our usual social run, 5K, and then myself and Kira hit the pool for another master swim session in the evening. So I've just written in the notes a variety of strokes and drills, and another great session which I really enjoyed. So that was Wednesday. As you can probably imagine, Thursday morning came and I was pretty tired given 2 big back-to-back days of volume and of movement. So I took it handy on Thursday, and then we had football training Thursday night. So similar format to Tuesday night's football session. This time I jogged to training, which is just it's less than a 10-minute jog from home, and I jogged home again from that session. So about a mile either side of the training with the 1 hour football. Friday morning, I like to take Friday as a pretty relaxed day, but we have been doing a Friday morning swim with the Masters group again. So myself and Kira were back in the pool for another Masters swim session. And I have noted on that session that I felt tired today, but still a pretty good set. Saturday came, and I took a rest day on Saturday. Was due to play football, but the game was cancelled, and didn't play. So that ended up being an unplanned but probably a necessary rest day given the volume of the week and the sort of mixture of volume. I would be well used to high volume training with the running, but given the sort of mixture of stimulus, even though the total amount of hours might be less to what I would be running in marathon training, the fatigue or the feeling is much different given like I said, the variety. So that was Saturday, and then Sunday just gone was a 9 a.m. swim, again with the group. And I've just noted there that I was moved up to another lane and feeling good, and that I'm really delighted with the progress. I've also wrote that I should look after my shoulders because I can definitely feel them being worked massively, and should probably include some shoulder preparation or some shoulder prehab before swims in the future, just to make sure that I'm keeping them healthy. I've also written that the butterfly stroke is absolutely brutal. So yeah, I'm probably flapping about in the pool like a fish out of water, because the butterfly stroke is, when it's done properly, it looks amazing. But when it's done by someone that has never attempted it, it's brutal. So not a pretty sight was me trying to do some drills and the butterfly on Sunday. And then Sunday afternoon was absolutely beautiful. Kira was busy with some work, so I actually decided to go out for a jog on Saturday, and got out for an hour and 20 minutes at just 5-minute K pace. So keeping the heart rate really low. The sun was shining. I just wanted to get out there and really felt like jogging. So ended up heading out and getting a lovely run in the sun done. So that was Sunday, and that takes us into Monday or yesterday. So I jumped on the treadmill yesterday for a threshold session. I wanted to do something. I was actually chatting to a friend of mine as I walked into the gym, and he asked what I was doing, and I said I didn't know. I hadn't planned anything, but I knew I wanted to do something a little bit faster and to sort of look at like a threshold type session. So I ended up jumping on the treadmill, warming up, seeing how I felt. I always like to do like a progression warm up to sort of gauge how my legs feel. So I'll do the first 10 minutes at a really easy jog, and then the last 5 minutes of my warm up, of a 15-minute warm up, I tend to progress and see how I feel at those sort of moderate to steady speeds, and felt pretty good. So decided to do 10 times 1 kilometer, or around 10 times 3 minutes 30. As a sort of a progressive session. I didn't want it to be all at the one pace, but at the same time I didn't want to completely shock my body with the first or second interval. So I did those all around about an average of, I think, 3:28 to 3:30 pace, but I started a little bit slower and finished a little bit faster, and took about a 50 to 60 second rest between each rep. On the 9th rep though, the treadmill stopped and I was forced to wait until I could get the treadmill going again and get it back up to speed. So I kind of let it rip a little bit on the last rep and got down to, by the end of the rep, I was seeing 255, 256 per K on the treadmill, but the whole rep was probably at an average of about 315 to 320. But got moving by the end of that, and really enjoyed it and felt good. That was Monday. Then this morning, Tuesday morning, we hit the pool again for another master session. So yeah, really enjoyed today's session. The structure of today's session was nice. Everything felt like it sort of progressed or complemented everything. So the drills that we did, the progression of the session, it sort of felt like everything complemented what was coming next. So really enjoyed that. It was another 6 a.m. Morning swim, which tends to be the time that swimmers train. I don't know if I can call myself a swimmer yet, but that seems to be the time to be in the pool. And yeah, it was a very enjoyable one, and we tend to, like, myself and Kira tend to sit in the cafe afterwards and have a coffee before Kira heads off to work. So yeah, that was good. You might look at that and think, for a man that's taking a break from racing, it's a lot of training, but I'm really just enjoying what I'm doing. I really enjoy moving my body. It makes me feel so much better. I also understand how to moderate my intensity, or how to control my intensity well, so that I can handle a lot of training. So that's a big thing that I would say. And I would say, like, from an energy perspective, I actually feel great. Moving my body and training really makes me feel good. It helps me sleep well, and I feel like I'm operating at a fairly good intensity, or a fairly good place, in a fairly good place at the minute. So hopefully that makes sense. Feel free to shoot me any questions through on training or anything like that. I'm always more than happy to answer. I suppose last thing is, the pool has been a really welcome break from other types of training that I would be typically doing at this time of year. Sessions outdoors, long runs outdoors, where it's cold, it's dark, it's miserable. The pool has been sort of a really nice, warm environment. I've probably gone a little bit soft, but yeah, I suppose it's also given me more enjoyment for the outdoor runs that I have been doing, because they're not as often. And yeah, I suppose when you go to run, you're very much looking forward to it. So that's the training week recapped. Like I said, please feel free to shoot me across any questions on Instagram, if you've got some, and I'll do my best to answer. So I suppose I kind of want to touch on December and this month as a month for training, and hopefully give you some tips or information on different approaches to training that you can decide to take during this month, and how we can deal with a month that can sometimes throw up some challenges. It's cold, it's dark, it's wet. There's Christmas parties happening left, right, and centre. Family routines are shifted. Maybe you've got some deadlines at work, and there's a lot of pressure on before the end of the calendar year. The racing season has also finished, and that can lead to a massive drop in motivation. And there's also the big temptation to wait until January to begin to train. So I think it's something that we can definitely hopefully provide some value on. And just, I suppose, to finish that, we shouldn't be striving for perfection in December, or any time of the year for that matter, but particularly during this month. Something is better than nothing, and basic training, some what I would call easier basic training, can really help move the needle forwards for the year ahead. So I suppose a few training philosophies that you can look to implement sort of throughout this month is, number one, keep the body moving. I personally like to keep things ticking over during this month. It definitely helps with, like, my mental clarity, my energy, my mood. It also makes what's going to come next much, much easier, because you've laid those foundations. And looking at training as just that, a foundation, it's not a punishment. Even if it's 30 to 40 minutes, it can keep the rhythm and routine intact, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. I guess secondly is lower the bar without dropping it. You don't have to be perfect. Races are generally done for the year. I'll come to the December races and the festive races that are happening over Christmas, especially in this part of the world. But for most people, the race calendar season is finished, and lots of people, I guess, take their foot off the pedal. And rightly so. There is no pressure to hit top fitness. You can keep things sustainable, and you definitely have permission to go easier and just to run based on feeling. You don't need to be absolutely punishing yourself. You don't need to be punishing yourself anytime, but this is a great time to just back off a little bit and continue training with a little bit of a lesser emphasis on hitting certain paces, or really dialing in on the intensity ranges, with the key caveat that you don't overdo it. And then lastly, or just on this sort of small section, is for me anyways, around this time of year, or particularly as we get closer to Christmas, when you get off work, or you're on a break from work or school or university or whatever that might be, is to sort of get it done before the day runs away with you. I know that has always been kind of my philosophy or my outlook on training, particularly in the week of Christmas. There's so much happening. There's family events, social occasions, there's just all sorts of things, and you're out of your normal routine. So for me, it's like, if I can get the training done or get something done in the morning, it just leaves the rest of the day to be whatever it needs to be or whatever it wants to be, and you're not left chasing your tail. And then lastly, I suppose, or a couple of the last points that I want to make here is, train for January, train with January in mind. That's what December's training is for. You're not training for, like I said, races that are going to happen over this period of time. You're really training with January in mind, and the new year in mind, and the races that are going to come. I had a conversation with someone that I coach lately, just in the last couple of days, and we spoke about how the training that you do now and the impact that can have on the marathon that she is going to run in Belfast in May time. And I guess that leads to like it's really about the periodization of your year, and how we want the marathon specific block of training to be 12 to 14 weeks pre-Belfast. So what we do between now and then, if we can really look to improve her aerobic foundation and her lactate threshold, that's going to leave her in a much better place, so that when we start to apply the marathon specific training, whenever we do 10, 12, 14 weeks out from the race, she's in a much better place. And so she has the capacity to run much, much, much quicker in the marathon. So I think a lot of people make the mistake of saying, I'll start January, and really you're limiting the potential for performance in your spring marathons or the half marathon that you've got maybe next August or whenever that might be. If you're doing something now to improve certain elements of your fitness and periodizing your year properly, it can really be a springboard for success for next year. So yeah, hopefully that's some ideas on training and sort of how to approach the festive period. I'm going to go into a little bit about nights out and parties and socializing and all the rest. And I suppose, number one, something that's, I suppose, worked for me in the last number of years has been to choose the big nights, choose the nights that you kind of want to go a bit harder on the booze, and that you're willing to sacrifice maybe a day or even potentially 2 days of training. Life is absolutely to be enjoyed, and but at the same time, for me, what has always worked nicely is to choose the nights that are going to be quote unquote bigger nights, and plan my rest days around that. I think planning is the key to everything and the key to success here. Also, don't try to train through a really heavy night. So if you've had a big heavy night on the booze, your recovery, the adaptation to training is going to be massively inhibited. And so, yeah, allow yourself that recovery after it. But if you've chosen to have 2, 3, maybe even 4 big nights over the festive period, over the month of December, you can kind of treat the other evenings as maybe nights where you're the designated driver, nights where you have maybe 1, 2 or 3 drinks maximum, and then you're a little bit fresher the next day, and that doesn't have as much of an impact on training. That's if performance is your goal. I mean, ultimately, if you're not really interested in performance and you just want to train for enjoyment and for good feeling, then by all means have as many big nights over December and the Christmas period as you desire. Another point, I suppose, is like the social night running hack. I don't really like hacks. I'm not a believer of hacks, but I'm going to call this one a hack. And that's we can always like adjust training and move training around to suit nights out. And if that means sometimes like doing your session or doing your longer run or doing something of quality on, or even just an easy run on the day of your night out, it means that you can recover the next day. You'll enjoy that evening much more because you feel like you've got something done. I suppose, again, a key thing to remember there is to ensure that hydration is adequate after the run, after the session, and that nutrition is adequate after the run as well, that you're replenishing those carbohydrate stores and eating some protein as well. Because if you are running, not really refueling or rehydrating or dehydrating yourself more with alcohol, recovery is going to be massively inhibited. And so you're kind of putting yourself into a hole, both from an alcohol perspective or a drink perspective, and also the training, because that's a stressor as well. So that's that. I'm trying to, I suppose, think out loud as I talk through these. And lastly, I guess, is, saying no is one of those things as well. If you really have some big goals and you've chosen those nights out as your big nights out, and you've got them in the diary and you've got them booked in, and they're the nights that you want to devote to, enjoying yourself and having that big night out. Just having that ability to say no. It's tough. But I suppose a good explanation and saying no is always good. It's always difficult, but it's always good. So next up is, should you take the week off? And quite a few people have asked me this over the years, is should you take the week off, probably of Christmas, the week of sort of Christmas into the new year. I suppose like why a week off can be positive. It's an opportunity to have like a psychological and a physical reset. It can really help prevent injury, and particularly during a really busy time and where there is a lot of running around and stressing. So it's that sort of potential for injury prevention. It can also renew motivation because you go away, you enjoy yourself with family and friends over the festivities, and then you come back with this renewed motivation in January. There's a lot to be said for that, and you do come back fresher, particularly if you've had a big year. If you've had a big year, don't hesitate to take a week off 2, 3, even 4 times a year. It does absolutely no harm, and it can do you the world of good. But some people prefer not to. If you're someone that does prefer to stay active because it makes you feel good, if it brings you mental clarity, if you do have races planned over the festivities, I've never been one for racing over Christmas, but there are quite a few races that do happen. And if you're someone that likes to race in those, then absolutely run through Christmas and run through that period. And I can also just keep momentum and keep that sort of identity of, I'm a runner and I'm someone that likes to stay active and keep healthy. And that's going to bring you happiness and sort of good mental health, which is really important. But also you can go with the middle ground. You can have an active recovery week, a week where you run every other day, maybe a period of time, a week, 2 weeks, 10 days of a reduced training load. And if you have a coach, it's definitely something worth speaking to your coach about. I would definitely encourage, if you're one of my own athletes, and this is something that's on your mind, to have a conversation with me about that and to sort of think about that. Again, particularly if you don't have races that are looming early in 2026 that you really want to prepare well for and be ready for. If you're someone that runs 5-6 days a week, maybe running every 2 to 3 days. Could be a nice way to take that kind of middle ground where you're not having a full week off or a full 10-day period off, but you're still doing something to really just continue taking over. So I just did mention also about racing over Christmas, and I mean this is definitely a reality for people. Particularly, I can't speak for Australia; I've got no idea, but particularly in Ireland here and in the UK, there are park runs. I think in the past I've seen park run happening on both Christmas Day and Boxing Day, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So perhaps maybe 4 park runs in 7 days. There are all sorts of races. I think in the States they call it turkey trots, but yeah, there's all sorts of 5k, 5 mile, 10k, 10 mile races. There are some trail races. There's a fantastic Purs race here in Ireland known as the Christmas Cracker, which I've done once, I believe. And no, twice I think, and that's a really tough race. But yeah, there's lots happening, and if you're someone that enjoys that, and likes that vibe, then yeah, the Christmas period could be a great time, to enjoy some races and enjoy the social aspect of racing. So I think it's just really important to acknowledge that. But what I would encourage you to do, especially if you celebrate Christmas and you enjoy the festivities, is to treat those races as sort of social occasions, controlled races, maybe a fitness test, kind of blow the cobwebs out kind of runs, not absolute peak performance attempts. And I suppose the reason for that is that break in routine for most people isn't going to be conducive to peak performance. When your routine is different, when your sleep patterns are different, when your food intake is very different from a quantity and a type perspective, maybe you've had more alcohol than normal, and whatever life looks like for you, it's generally different around the sort of December, but particularly the week of Christmas. And so, yeah, that's why I would encourage you to treat those Christmas races as more of a social and controlled occasion, and you've more chance of I suppose not getting injured and not destroying your relationship with the sport. And especially like if you are someone that wants to race and do those races, is respect the recovery. Don't try to cram too much into that period. If you are doing 1, 2 or 3 races over that festive period, is definitely don't be trying to do any training sessions in and around that. Treat those races as the training sessions, and perhaps just jog easy in between. Yeah, don't chase PBs is definitely one, and just enjoy the atmosphere, the community, the crack that goes along with those events, because it is good. Everyone's in good form. Most people are off work. It's pretty cool. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water whilst I'm on. So the next thing I'll quickly chat about is motivation or lack of motivation when the racing and the running season has come to a close. So for most people, I'm sure most listeners can relate to this. Maybe they've felt like this for quite a while now, if they did an autumn marathon and they haven't had much planned for the rest of the year. But motivation can definitely take a big dip. It can be difficult to care about training when there's not a race in the calendar, and when the weather is a bit more depressing and routine is disrupted. But I suppose a strategy that you can use to overcome that is to create some sort of like what I would call like anchor habits, habits that are kind of non-negotiables. The specific days that you run in the week, the days that you've set aside as your training days, and the time that you set aside on those days for training. For me, a nice one is that morning movement as like a non-negotiable, because I feel like the longer that I let it slide into my day, the less likely I am to get it done. And so if I can get it done early, it gets it out of the way, and it keeps me on top of the habit, and I feel much better in everything else that I do for the day, whether it's work or whatever else I'm up to. And I guess just think about giving yourself that January head start, by doing something. Like, I am repeating myself again, but by doing something during this month, you're going to be in such a better place in January. If you can sort of put that motivation slump to the side and start moving again. And I guess to sort of add to that is that the motivation will follow. If the body is moving and it's doing something, the motivation comes after. People often get that wrong, and they think they got to be motivated first to start. Very few people are motivated to start. It's you start first, and the motivation will follow, and that's when the discipline will sort of follow, because you build a habit, and you've developed that consistency. So hopefully that gives you some information on motivation when the season's over, racing throughout the Christmas period. Should you take some time off over the Christmas period, dealing with social occasions, nights out, parties, all the rest? My own approach over Christmas has always been very similar, and it's based on feeling. It's based on what I want to do and what I enjoy doing, and that's kind of how I do approach my training. And I like to train throughout the month of December. I don't race. I value the routine and the structure of sort of the training and how it makes me feel. It gives me energy. I definitely enjoy my food, my pints, my nights out more when I feel fitter and healthier. If I feel like I've got into a little bit of a slump, I just don't enjoy those occasions as much, and I just feel a little bit out of sorts. But I absolutely don't chase perfection. I don't try to make training perfect. I show up with what I have on a given day, and I don't push through unnecessary fatigue. If I'm doing a threshold session and it means that I'm running 6-minute miles instead of 5:40 per mile or 5:30 per mile, so be it. I allow that. And I accept the fact that there's, more fatigue in the body, a little bit more stress maybe because I've been eating different foods and consuming more alcohol than usual. Whatever that might look like, I really do allow it to not get me down, and I accept sort of where I currently am, and that will also lead to sort of more longevity and more adaptation from a physiological point of view as well. You will gain more fitness when you work with what you have on a given day rather than try to stretch and chase something. So that's how I approach it. Like I mentioned before, I like to run earlier in the day. Over Christmas, it might turn into a little bit later in the morning because you're lying on a little bit later in the mornings, or there's less routine. But some classic sessions that I like to include over the sort of December and Christmas period is definitely lots or plenty of easy training and sort of low aerobic, relaxed, whether it's running, cycling, or swimming or whatever else. I keep it mostly easy, and some basic threshold workouts. Some basic threshold intervals, be it 8 to 10 by 3 minutes. 6 times 5 minutes, 5 times 6 minutes, 3 to 4 by 10 minutes, those types of workouts, where of course the speed will vary, but the emphasis is on improving threshold and running at that sort of moderate, steady to high intensity, where you're not absolutely destroying yourself. So hopefully that is a little bit of info on how I manage the Christmas period. I definitely plan the bigger nights. I put them in the calendar and know that they're going to be the bigger nights, and that allows me to be more intentional with my training in the days leading in, and be a little bit more flexible then with the rest of my time. Is definitely how I like to manage it. So I'm probably going to leave it there. I don't want to go on for too long, speaking just on my own without Luke. It's just not the same when there's just one of us. But I suppose just to reassure you guys, the listener, you don't need to have perfect training throughout the month of December. Don't try to have perfect training. I think if you strive or overstretch in an attempt to be perfect, it will set you up for failure, and mentally that's no good. Keep some routine, keep some rhythm, try to maintain some flow in training. And enjoy the festive period. I'd also encourage you to message the podcast or my own page on Instagram with any questions that you have. We're always happy to answer questions on the pod itself. So if you have some questions about anything running related or training related, please send them through. And it would be great if you've enjoyed the episode, share it with your mates, share it on socials if you want. And we'll be back next week as hopefully a duo, and we'll catch you later. Take care.